Hello, everybody. Welcome back into Between the Ears. I'm Schuyler Callihan. That is Christopher Hall. We are back in the saddle. Football is finally back as West Virginia took the field for their first fall camp practice on Wednesday. Chris was there today. Also, as he and the rest of the media were able to take in a little bit of fall ball here. So, Chris, it's been a while. Obviously, we talk to each other all the time, but how have you been?
Good, man. Just excited about this football season. Finally getting
Yeah.
retention under controls. Was excited after seeing them the first time last year, how quick they were with everything, how they just went with the ground running, and same thing this year, even further along than last year. So it's good to see the program's back in order. And no surprise when you fix the NIL, you fix the money, everything
Yeah.
else kind of solves itself along the way. So it's good to see. They've gotten bigger. It's kind of fun. It gets you more excited when you actually get to see the guys up close and see what they're working on and see how they progress from last season. And looks like they have. And looks like they got some guys.
Yeah. I mean, it's been what? Maybe 3 or 4 years now that we've been talking about Neil Brown and the hot seat and all this stuff, and it's just kind of become a little monotonous to sit here and talk about a coach potentially being on the hot seat or not, and to have a 9-win season, you win the bowl game, you finish in the top five of the Big 12. It changes expectations. Like last year at this time, you and I were sitting here talking about does Neil have to do to save his damn job. Well, he saved his job, and a lot more. And I think a lot of people probably have changed, kind of their perspective on this team. They were preseason picked seventh in the Big 12, so it's a little bit more love. I think they're still being undersold a little bit, but we'll dive into that here in just a few moments. But I do want to go ahead and announce so for this football season, our shows, what our plans are going to be is we're going to have Between the Ears Sunday morning, which will be the day after, the morning after, which we always do, kind of another recap of the game from Saturday. And then we'll air another episode on Tuesday and Wednesday. Thursday, we'll have the walkthrough game day show with Eugene, and I will be breaking down that week's game, along with making our predictions and other stuff like that. Friday will be relatively sports. Saturday, we'll have the post game show, and then we circle back around to Sunday. So, really, you're getting 6 days a week of content here from us. Monday being the only day we kind of take a step back and take a breather. And if you haven't paid attention, or if you're just now noticing, yes, we went through a little bit of a rebrand this offseason. So a lot of stuff happened behind closed doors. We're still with Sports Illustrated, but now it's West Virginia Mountaineers on SI is the official name of the website. So be sure to check out all of our stuff there, our YouTube page, Twitter handle. It's all now SI_WVU. So now that we've got all the housekeeping stuff figured out, what are you most looking forward to seeing with this team? What do you want to see answered in the next couple of weeks, whether it's with your own eyes or with whatever Neil tells you in the press conference? What are you really looking forward to seeing?
I think Neil would agree. We're not going to know what this team has until after about game 3 or 4. Maybe get some questions answered after Penn State, but we really don't know how good Penn State is. Yes, they kind of reload, but to be honest, they beat up on a lot of the bad teams in the Big Ten. So they were kind of touched on Wednesday. We don't know. It looks like a tough schedule. We said that going into last year. Looked like a tough schedule. Now
Texas
that
Tech, TCU, yeah.
now the doubters after the season said, well, they didn't beat anybody. So let's just kind of wait and see on that. But really, I want to see more from the receivers. It's really been this program's bugaboo since Dana's left, is they just haven't had a go-to guy per se. They've had some guys that just never blossomed into that guy. To be fair, it probably had a lot to do with depth, and they probably caught more double teams than they were probably could handle. Um, but that's going to be up to this room this year. Do they have the depth? You can start naming off a bunch of names, but none of them have 1,000 receivers. None of them have really had a breakout year. Maybe a breakout year because you know their name now. But the yards aren't produced, and I'll go back to Neil Brown what he said in April. Hey, if most of your yards are coming from Buchanan, it's a problem. So there's a couple guys that racked up their yards on some bad teams. You gotta go do it against some good teams if you want to be Big 12 contenders, and that's what we need to see. We need to see somebody go attack the ball. There's some guys out there that look better. Jane Bray looks like he's been a nice addition. Justin Robinson has flashed some things. And Hudson Clement looks really good. Changed his number. Maybe it's the number changed to three. I don't know, but he looked good. Garrett mentioned it today that he's gotten really good at the back shoulder catches. Actually got to see one of those for a touchdown. So, I don't really put a lot of stock in the fall camp. The receivers are doing good, as I mean the defensive backs are bad, and vice versa. So, not don't want to see a lot. Do see some attacking, but I've seen attacking the ball in fall camp and not translate on the field. It's a little different when the lights are on. Guys can hit you then, but
What
a little
year
bit
was
more
that
protection.
that you went and saw camp and you're like, man, these receivers are like insanely good, making all these plays, and it ended up being a bad. Was it 2013
21, 20,
or
no, 21.
oh, it
It
was
was
21? Okay,
Daggy's last year, I think. It was Bryce Ford and all the. Was that the year they lost to Pitt? Maybe it
22,
was
22.
22. It was 22. It was
Yeah.
22. Yeah. I mean, they looked really good in practice. Everybody said it. And it just, maybe it was that losing that first pick game, they kind of lost confidence. Who knows? A lot of things can go in a different direction there, but maybe they got exposed early in that first game, or maybe it was the second game. Defensively, they were kind of scrambling after Charles Woods went out. There was a lot of factors going into that, but the offense just kind of stalled. And really, they haven't had anybody beat press coverage since Neil Brown's here on a consistent basis. So, I mean, he already mentioned that. Hey, if they can beat coverage this season and get downfield, this offense is going to be really good. So, I mean, they're fully aware of the receivers' downfalls. I've been talking about it for a while. I feel like at least I don't have to talk about retention anymore. That was a 2 year,
Yeah.
3 year thing where like, look, he keeps losing players. You can't judge Neil Brown on this when you lose everybody. But
Well, I mean,
now we can get to that point since they're actually, again, seeing them today for the first time. Man, they are just flying around. It doesn't look like the second day of practice. It's crazy. It's crazy how much things have changed in really the last 2 years. It's wild with that. But really, it's
I'm
got to be receivers, and I think you really have to, what's the linebackers? Great young talent. We haven't seen Trotter yet. He's expected to be really good. Um, and then secondary, I think defense as a whole has to answer all three levels. I think again, you have some guys, but you have to prove it, and that's kind of where we're at. And it's if you're going back and forth in camp, I think that's a good thing. That means they're both adjusting and learning, and you may have some versatility there. But we'll have to see. They've made some plays, and I think offense. I think O line should be good. Running back's going to be good. It's just all about the receivers, and can Garrett stay calm, collected, and not put too much pressure on himself and press things, try to push it too much. He seems like he's really taken in coaching and kind of understands where he is, where he needs to be coming into the year.
I'm a firm believer that the longer you stay in a certain situation, the better you're going to be at it. And I understand, there's reasons why guys transfer out, and whether it's playing time, scheme fit, whatever. But the more reps you get, the
Money,
better you're going to craft your
so
game.
much
And
money.
huh?
It was all about money.
Or the money. So, but when you look at guys like Hudson Clement, you're right. I mean, he had, what was it, 3 touchdowns in that game against Duquesne, 200 yards or give or
Yep.
take. You look at his season totals and you think, man, it felt like he should have had more than that, because he had that big game against Duquesne, and then he kept showing up in big moments, whether it was against Baylor or Houston or so be it. It just wasn't consistent enough. And I think you've got to take that and build on it. But you also have other guys too that, they're gonna have to replace Devin Carter, which I think they'll be able to do. They brought in Jaden Bray and Justin Robinson, 2 veterans that have played in Power 4 football. But you have bodies there. You have guys that have that experience, although they're young, Traylon Ray, Rodney Gallagher, but they have more bodies there at that position. And I think you could probably say this about the whole entire roster, that they have more bodies and more options than they've ever had under Neil Brown. And that alone should be a sign of things getting better and having a more well-rounded product. Now, before I go to the defensive side, offensively, with that group up front, you lose Zach Frazier, you lose Doug Nestor. It's 2 massive losses. You're not just going to replace those guys. But, and maybe I'm crazy here, but I think a lot of people were just seeing that for what it is and saying, "Oh man, they're not going to be just as good nationally." That is, the national people are saying they're not going to be as good because they lost those two. Brandon Yates played a lot of football. Nick Malone has played some football, and Xavier Bosley was a very, very good tackle at Jacksonville State, one of the top players in FCS. I don't know that I expect a huge drop off from where they were a year ago, despite losing two elite players.
Yeah, I think the offensive line is going to be fine. To be honest, they may even be better as a whole unit. And I know it sounds kind of crazy when you lose someone like Zach Frazier, and it's nothing against Nestor either. It's just that's what should be happening, right? Like when Colton McKivitz was here, like, well, how are you going to get better than that? Well, they're getting better guys. They're
Yeah.
getting guys.
Let's be
That's
fair.
how
At
you
one point, it was
develop.
McKivitz and four other guys.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So yeah, I mean, you develop these guys so they can step in when guys move on after graduation, or they trans. At this point, if guys are transferring, it's probably because they're not getting playing time. But yeah, I think the offensive line will be fine. There's plenty. Yates is big. They're all getting bigger. Demis Remax up front. Rod Bottom's got bigger. I mean, you've got guys up there that, like you said, they've all played a lot of football, and that's how you develop an offensive line. It may, if they haven't had much luck, but I think in that regard, as far as the offensive line, they've had a little. When you got guys that were good from West Virginia that wanted to play for West Virginia, was it an offensive line? Unless you're a tackle and probably projected to be a top one or two NFL draft pick, aren't really getting paid that much. They're not really sought after, even if Frazier was getting some phone calls apparently last off season, but it's not going to be like the $1 million guys that you're seeing right now. It's
At the
quarterback.
skill
So
positions. Yeah.
when you have guys that you can develop that are dedicated during that moment, I think that's what's really helped them create the depth that they have. Because if you look, I know about the defense, but when you look what happened to the defense before Ren Baker got here, I mean, it was getting decimated constantly. It
Yeah.
was constant turnover. Like you can't develop guys, freshmen and sophomores, that quick and get them the complexes of Big 12 offense. Like it's just not going to happen, and we saw the results. So that's what I think. That's if they got lucky anywhere, it was the offensive line. So I
Yeah.
think that's really when I'm looking at this offensive line. When I say it might be better as a whole as a unit, and they might be deeper than last year, it's more likely to have because they've been able to keep this group together for quite some time. And uh, and then you kind of couple that with Garrett Green being there. Now you've got to run it. CJ Donaldson looks really good. His demeanor is different this year. Like he looks like he's got to stay healthy, but it looks like he could have a really big year. Like these guys have all played together for a while. They know how CJ runs. They know how. Jaheim was only last year, but they have a very good understanding how Jaheim runs. So I think that group up front, I think it's fine. I think really what this offense needs is just get some receivers that's going to perform for you week in, week out. Get some contributors along the way on the outside. And the offense could be probably one of the best, if not the Big 12 in the country at that point. Because if you got to, if you're getting the deep ball at a consistent rate,
With
and you
that
got a
running
guy
game.
like you with that running game, yeah, they're going to be really tough. So I like what I've seen from Jaden Bray in the spring and the fall. I think he kind of has that it factor. He's really good at tracking the ball, and he's really good contorting his body and bringing it in. Like I've yet to see him uh, drop a ball. Knock on wood. Doesn't mean he hasn't. Just in my time, but I haven't seen him drop it. And I've seen less drops. Now, I guess we'll wait on the defense. Like that's on the defense.
I mean, it is glorified walkthroughs right now. So
Like I said, it's a little different now. Yeah, they're not padded, but man, they're going at each other even without pads. They're not tackling, but they said it was going to be physical, and they're physical without pads. Yeah, they're not really doing inside stuff, obviously hitting it at that level. But man, hand fighting and everything else, pushing and shoving on the outside, it's physical right now, and it's good to see from both sides because even I know we're switching to defense. Like the DBs are bigger. You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
you got
Well,
big receivers and big DBs fighting each other right now. So when they get to line up against little DB, hey, but they'll be good.
those
When they
poor
go
Albany
against this,
souls in week
when they
two, they
go
are so.
when they go up against some of the better teams in the Big 12 that have those bigger DBs, they'll be more prepared for this
Well, that's a perfect segue because I was actually going to ask you about the size and all that stuff, and then I know it sounds kind of weird that you're like somewhat checking out other players here, other guys on the field, but it's a legit thing. Like, and Neil even kind of talked about it at his press conference. Like, you just look and you see what could be more of a team that looks like a contender just visually. And that's I wanted to
Right.
get your point on that. Did you see that? Like when you go out there and saw them for the first time today, actually moving around and running around, is there a difference from what you saw visually with this group compared to say, I don't know, when he first took the job in 19 or even last year?
Oh yeah, it's night and day from that
And where does it
2019.
show up most? Where does it show up
I
most?
I think across the board they're just longer. I think if there's an undersized unit right now as a whole, maybe linebacker,
Yeah.
might be
That's
a little
probably
too.
makes sense.
Maybe I may be a little too harsh because I'm still in that '90s. Let's get those big neck rolls, huge pads
Brian
on, but
Urlacher.
it's just a different game. They're, it's not that they're not strong. They just don't look as big as maybe as they need to be because you can still look at some of the, the blue bloods of the world. And that's a very unfair comparison right now of how big they are. So I don't think that they're that big size as far as that, but yeah, they've gotten a lot bigger in the secondary, especially in the receiver this year. I think those are two areas this year where you're noticing a really big difference. And like you can get back to the offensive line where they've just progressively gotten bigger. Um, you know, you always got to credit Mike Joseph. When you see these guys come in freshmen, Jaheim White has gotten really strong. He's gotten, he was came in pretty good shape, and he's
Yeah.
gotten even better. CJ slimmed down. He's gotten bigger in the sense it looks like he's gained muscle mass, but slimmed down. Get rid of that baby fat. Maybe all the fast food. He's finally cutting down some of the fast food.
No
But
more
I
no
mean, that's
more
essentially what
wings.
it is. I mean, once they get into like that Mike Joseph program for a couple of years, you can really notice a huge difference. But what you're seeing now, and you can go back to this press conference, the press conferences 2019 and 2020 when they were talking about their defense, they want length. And you saw it with like Jared Bartlett when he was here, and you could see every now and then they were getting some pieces what they were looking for, but now you're starting to see it all come together. As far as like they're still young, a lot of them, but when they're young and they're that big, that's a good sign because Joseph's only going to add on to what they have. So you're seeing a lot more holes closed faster defensively because of that. Um, trying to squeeze that pass in, off the slot, off a hitch or something, is not going to be as easy because they have the length. So I think that's really the two biggest as far as size goes, the DBs and the receivers. So that people will definitely notice a big difference there. But defensive line, I feel like they've been big, fairly big, not monsters, but they've steadily grown that room as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at some of these guys. I mean, like Dantes Fagan, Garnett Hollis Jr., Kokora Tarnu. I mean, all these defensive backs. I mean, you're looking at their height and weight. They're all 6 foot, 6'1", 6'2", around 195, 200 pounds. That's a stark comparison to what we had seen in years past. I mean, there were times where they're rolling out 5'10", 175 foot or
Yeah.
175 pound corners. So that's a big difference too. But yeah, I mean, I guess defensively, I mean, what can you even take away from what they're doing right now? Because I mean, you're not padded, so it's a little bit different. I think this probably shows more about the pass coverage than what you can see what they're going to be able to do against the run. But how much of what of that were you able to see, and what can you shed some light on defensively?
Yeah, you just want to see their reaction, right? They're going 7-on-7, how they handle the under routes, how they're handling the deep ball. Um, yeah, it's still a work in progress. There's a lot of communication there, and you got new guys kind of working, but it's still different than last year. I think when you bring in guys like Hollis and uh, is it Aiden Gardner? I'm trying to
Yeah,
may have
Aiden Garnes. Yep,
Aiden Gardner.
he's a
When
big
you bring
kid
in
too
guys
for a
like
corner.
that, and you got two big kids like that, and you bring guys in like that, they're adding a big value just with their size, but they've got skills as well. So for them, I think right now they may be, and they didn't do anything in practice that I didn't like or anything, but I want to see them when they're at full speed because right now, it's only day two for them, so they might be a little bogged down. still with everything, and they're just moving to reaction time. But um, it they're reacting. They're quick. They've got length, but still need to see a little more. Um, Again, you're not really tackling. They do kind of like the arm thing there, where you kind of
Two
wrap
hand
up, but you
touch.
don't take them down. And they wrap up a little bit, but it's defense is going to be to be determined. I think they're still going to struggle. And they might struggle early just because you still got youth and you still got a lot of new pieces you're trying to bring in. Now again, they're young, but these guys have been a lot of these guys. Some of these guys have been in the program now for a couple of years, so they have a good understanding. So I think it's going to take those, at the health willing, I think towards the end of the year, this is a unit that you could see getting stronger as the kind of like what they did last year. But I think by the time the end of last year, it'll be better than last year's defense. But I think they may struggle a little bit, or struggle a little bit early. Kind of look at the schedule. Maybe Penn State. You don't know what they're going to bring with the new offensive coordinator for Kansas. You may have an idea. They might rack up some yards, right? I mean, he did a pretty good job with Kansas, but that's our first game, so you don't know how to judge it yet. It's probably not going to be very good offensively. So we don't know what we don't. It's all like, well, they've got some new pieces that they're bigger, got some good young talent there, but how they handle it, is it judged? Is it fair to judge each linebacker? Now, if they start winning against this offensive line, you may have some because I don't. To me, if the offensive line struggles, it's not an offensive line problem. That's good defense. So I
Right.
think that's one area that you can judge. Well, if the offensive line struggles, it's not a worry about the offensive line. It's going to be like, well, defense may have something in front.
I've been trying to think about this for maybe the last 24 hours or so, and I can't really pinpoint it, but because I mean, I think there could be so many different things, but if you had to put one or emphasize one area, highlight one area where something cannot go wrong outside of Garrett Green, what cannot go wrong for this team between now and the time they kick things off at noon on August 31st?
Man, there's a lot of things that go wrong.
That's what I'm saying. It's hard to just point it down to one thing, but
Aside from injuries too,
yeah,
because
that's
you,
a given.
you any team can get decimated with injuries. I think if the receivers don't produce, this could be a big year. Probably, I don't want to say as down years a repeat, but I think you may see less wins, but we don't know how good the rest of the teams are either. So
Yeah,
I,
yeah.
I I think what everybody wants to see, right, is a step forward, get that ninth regular season win, and shoot for that 10th in a bowl game. And ideally, you want to try to
And
get in the Big
nine
12 championships.
and
You want to
9
try to
in
get,
this year would maybe get you to the Big 12 championship and
yeah,
then maybe
depending
even
on
a
who the
playoff.
losses, right? So if you can get that 10th win, in the Big 12 championship, then yeah, that's a huge success. But I think that's really what you want to see moving forward. But I think for them to actually to be a contender, really the weight's on the receivers. Gotta
Yeah.
go make plays. Like
You have the
I
running
don't
game.
think
That's
that
taken care of.
can be emphasized enough. Like def to me, the defense will make stops, and I think they might win you a game or two. But I think going into this year, like you have to know that its offense has to carry you most of these games, and the receivers are going to have to make big plays, come up in big moments. You're going, when you're on the road, you got to something happen that it's third and long. You're going to have to make a play. Like plain and simple, you have to make a play. You cannot always have to hope that you're getting second and six. Like, yeah, that's the ideal world, but that's not realistic. So you have to be able to be. They need that guy that's going to move the chains. Like it doesn't have to be Stedman Bailey. Man, you're going if you can get two, that can get you close to 1,000 apiece, and they may win, that 10th game in the bowl game. I don't know how good Utah is. Like one loss may get you in. Two losses may not get you in to the Big 12 championship. So
Well,
we'll have to see.
all I gotta say is you're already in mid-season form, my friend. Because a perfect segue again, and you don't even know what I'm about to talk about. You just we're on the same wavelength. So I'm actually going to bring this up. It's our fan poll of the week that we posted on Twitter yesterday, and that is what will WVU's record be at the end of the 2024 season? The overwhelming majority. picked 9-3. 42% was the percentage there for that. 8-4 was 26%. 10-2 or better, 25%, and only 7% of the voters said 7-5. Do you agree? 9-3 is kind of on on par for course. I mean, I don't know. 9-3 with this schedule, and I know we talked about it before. We don't really know what it's going to turn out to look like, but 9-3 to me would be like winning 10 games last year with that schedule.
Maybe. I mean, heading into fall camp, I'm thinking 8 wins. Just again, you can toss a bunch of names at me and tell me how good they're going to be, but they haven't proven it yet. So there's a lot to prove yet with this group. Optimism is fun. I think it's great. I'm definitely excited for this season. I think there's a ton of potential for this team, but
This is the
man,
most
you
hype
know,
a
Bryce
football team has
Bryce Ford
had.
Wheaton was, got we got excited about Bryce and Sam James. It just never first. I mean, you can say it and go back. There was a lot of problems then. It wasn't just on them, but they didn't do really anything um, to push the team forward. So you need a bunch of guys kind of pushing the team forward. They just didn't have it. They definitely have. Obviously, we've named Garrett, Shaheen, CJ offensively and the whole offensive line. Hey, Rodney he came in with a highly talented recruit. They're trying to find ways to get him the ball last year. They're probably going to do the same this year. Gotta make plays, man. Gotta make that move and get upfield. We need 50
Yeah,
yarders. We need 60 yarders. Hey, we need a 75 yarder on the first play on a drive. That's what it's going to take sometimes. If you want to go win a Big 12 championship, it's going to take plays like that to get it done, especially on the road. You got to keep the crowd quiet. You're going to have to make a play to maybe grab momentum or keep the momentum. So none of those guys have done that yet, and that's big. We saw what happened at Houston. They didn't
oof.
handle success at times, and this is where you come into year two with the same group and say, all right, guys had a little success. What did you learn? Did you learn anything? We'll find out as the season goes along. That's really all you can. It's really all you can do. So I'm looking at it more the 8 win right now, but I haven't done an extent. Like I haven't really looked
Well, you
at
don't have to put it in
everybody
Sharpie yet.
extensively yet. Yeah, I
Yeah,
haven't looked at it extensively yet.
yeah,
But eight
we'll
wins
get to
is
that.
to me should be where if I was Vegas, I wouldn't be. What would they have it at 6.5? Is that what
Yeah,
it's
I
starting
mean,
off
I've
as? It
had
was
the
something
over
crazy.
on that since it came
Yeah,
out.
so I would
Oh
say
my
if I was
goodness.
setting it, I would be at 7.5,
That
maybe
yeah,
even eight,
exactly.
seven and a
Yes.
half, 8.5, because
Too
you would
much
think
talent
at seven
returning.
and a half is probably still too low. Considering I'm saying 8, but um, yeah, there's just not a lot of production on that outside right now for me to say, hey, you know what? People can't just focus on the run game.
Yeah.
They have to focus on the outside as well. So if they can focus on the run game, um, that's where I think we can fall into problems with the offensive line because it's not that I don't think they have it, but it's just man, if you can just load that box up on them, it makes it a tough day for everybody, and that's when injuries start happening, guys start falling on legs. It's a mess.
This is probably the most preseason hype in Morgantown since Will Greer, maybe 2018. I mean, it has
Yeah,
to be. It's not even close.
not to that level. I would say the
No.
2017 career, going into
Yeah.
2017. Hopefully, it ends better
Yeah.
than that did. And I will say this: we want Garrett to be healthy, right? That's should go without saying. We want Garrett to run this thing and go win a Big 12 championship. But he is a runner. Something bad happens to him. Nico looks really good. I mean, don't want to start
Yeah.
pounding the horn for
Go
next
go ahead and
year.
go and talk about Nico a little bit because
Don't
Neil
want to
Neil
start
talked about
pounding the table for next year, but Nico looks good. Nico looks tall in that pocket. Nico looks comfortable now. Nico looks like he's ready to take over the program next year. I don't want to put too much expectations on the kid, but Nico looks good. He looks
it.
really good. I like Nico.
So we're gonna go and talk about the Heisman campaign in 2025.
I don't want
Let's
to
go and get
know.
that started.
To me, you got to prove it. But yeah, he looks really good. I'll be curious to see if something.
What's the biggest difference from
I
him?
want to
Is
see
it
an
just knowing the
equipment I
system?
want to just see one. I just want to see an equipment malfunction on Garrett for a series, in a game this year, so I can get a real good look at Nico. Nico looks really good. He's really turned it around the last couple of years. He looked pretty good last year because he was more comfortable, and this year he's standing really tall in that pocket. He looks comfortable. And what's the freshman, the kid Wilkerson? I'm trying to
Khalil
get. I got too
Wilkins?
many names. Wilkins.
Yeah,
Hey man, he looks like he could do something someday. So he's a young skinny
yeah.
kid, but he's tall. And get Mike Joseph well in a couple years, get him under Nico, and learn, see what happens. But he looks a little poised out there for a young guy.
They've got a very good succession plan because, I mean, we saw it paid off for Garrett. Now you've got Nico just waiting in the balances. He could have went somewhere. You have Cleo Wilkins. You also have Brody McCorder, who committed to the 26 class. My mind's all over the place. There's a reasonable kind of path here for West Virginia to stay towards the top of the Big 12 for a while because not just the quarterback situation, but you look at a lot of the pieces of this roster are very young. I mean, the receiving room's young, Jaheim White. You have a couple of other running backs in there that are true freshmen that they're really high on. The defensive line they like. Nate Gabriel, Isaac
Linebackers,
Kinsler.
you
I
still
mean,
have
it's
DBs coming in. Like
we could
it's
go
that.
down
I
the
think that's
2 hour
what's
long
one of
rabbit
the
hole
things
talking
that's
about the
so
future of this team.
exciting. I think that's one thing that's so exciting, and kudos for Nico and them for being patient because you see so many kids like, well, I'm good, I'm good enough to start now, and they leave. Be patient, man. He's gonna have 2 years of eligibility, and he's gonna come in just running. I mean, he's gonna be ready to
Yep.
go. Not everybody's Johnny Manziel or Pat White or whatever freshman you want to throw out there that quarterback. Those aren't a dime a dozen. Those are few and far between. Those rarely happen. They get talked
Yeah.
about a lot. It seems like it happens more frequently, but we've seen it. Was it did Brock Purdy struggle after his freshman year? Yeah, I know he's not struggling now. But there was an
He
Iowa
may
State
have.
kid. I don't think it was him. Who was it? It was a kid at Iowa State. They went like freshman quarterback. Purdy may have been one that finished it out. But the kid before him struggled, right? And he never bounced back after
Deckers?
freshman year.
Deckers?
Maybe it was, and you'll see it. We've seen it from quarterbacks. They get thrown in a freshman. They have a pretty solid year, but then, man, they just never develop. They just the tape's out and they lose confidence. Something happens. I think psyche. Maybe they were just never that good enough to begin with.
It's a
It
fragile
just
position to handle.
it's a very fragile position. So kudos for them and getting these kids to understand. Hey, man, sit back, learn the system, learn the lead from the guy in front of you. And man, when you come in, Nico will be a great example going forward.
Well, to wrap it up, you did talk to a few players today. I believe it was Garrett Green, Jaheim, and Sean Martin. So anything interesting?
No,
I know
not Jaheim. It
very
was
they're
Garrett, Wyatt,
or
and
Wyatt,
Sean.
Wyatt.
And Sean.
So I know that sometimes they're meant of very few words, but did you notice anything from what they said today, or just the attitude that they have entering this season?
I like that their focus is on the Big 12 championship. Um, Look, every team out there,
They say that.
it's 1-0. It's we want to win the conference championship. Want to go to playoffs. There was no mention of playoffs. They want to win a Big 12 championship. So that mindset to me, they made that clear that that was their goal. And I think, obviously they're going to have the goal of going to the playoff. You win the Big 12, you go into
It'll
the
take care of
playoff.
itself.
Yeah. So I like how that where that mindset is. You can see Sean. He battled injuries last year. You can see Sean's more comfortable just talking, and Wyatt's just happy to be playing for West Virginia. And here's a kid that's going to be on making every watch list. Going to be an all, one likely going to be an All American. You know, from
Maybe
multiple
first round pick.
publications, could be a consensus. Yeah, it could be. So again, it just goes back to Ren Baker, retention. Great job this staff does. Keep these kids focused, goal oriented, and doing everything with nutrition, scouting, whatever. There's coaches everywhere now. You're allowed to have all these coaches. So I think that, Neil Brown's basically the CEO of the program, right? Yeah, that's kind of what these guys are.
He can kind of just sit there and coach now for the first
Not,
time in a
no,
while.
he can in a sense, but there's still so much that goes on. But
Right.
it's definitely. it's trending in the right direction, and hearing these kids talk, it's refreshing to hear. It's not that previous players didn't say Big 12 championship, but when they say it this year, it was more of a mission statement than a hope.
Yeah.
So it's not a hope they win, it's that they want to win. So it's just different when you got guys that play together now for a while and that they've all kind of worked together because this is a year-round deal now. They've all been working together the last 2 years for this moment. It's Green's last ride, Wyatt's last
More than
ride. So
likely, yeah.
those are two guys that, hey man, they want to go win this thing, and they want to do it for West Virginia and the fans and all the hoopla, right? So it's good. You can just sense there's a different focus with this football, and it just goes back to, hey, we don't have to teach kids how we're going, how we run things around here. The culture's there, everything's in
Yeah.
place. It's just a matter of let's work on building a playbook. Let's work on winning more than 9 games.
I mean, we talked about it before we started recording here of just about, I mean, it starts week one. I mean, you're going to get a really good idea as to how legit this team is when they take on Penn State on August 31st. And if they somehow win that game, we might have to be pulling an all-nighter in terms of churning out some content because that's going to be a fun weekend to be had in the Mountain State. But I think, unless there's any objections here, I think that's going to do it for us here today in our first episode back for the season here on Between the Ears. That's Christopher Hall. I'm Schuyler Callihan. Make sure you hit that subscribe button on our YouTube page, now called West Virginia on SI. You can follow us on X at SI_WVU. Next week, we'll start our actual in-season schedule where it's Sunday, Tuesday, and Wednesday on the show. And obviously the walkthrough and all that stuff will come as the season wraps around here in a couple of weeks. So for Christopher Hall, I'm Schuyler Callihan. Thank you for listening and tuning into another edition of Between the Ears. We'll check back with you on Sunday. Take care.